for the motion to be debated. It was placed on the order paper to be debated in April. So from January to April, practically 3 months after, Mr. Speaker. When that motion was placed on the order paper and was about to be debated on the day, lo and behold, the night before, we were informed on this side of the House that the motion cannot be proceeded with because it contravenes some section of the Constitution. What we did on this side of the House, we amended, sir, based on the instruction. Again, you approved it for it to be debated in June of 2022. Lo and behold, sir, the night before the morning, the motion was set to be debated. I got a letter from the clerk's office stating that it contravenes some other section of the Constitution. So January to June, sir, of 2022, half of the year, sir. So the other thing too, sir, several questions I put to this assembly. These questions were submitted before myself and 7 others of my colleagues went on suspension on the 4th of August. These questions were all approved by you, sir, placed on the order paper, and because of my suspension, now tell me, sir, 7 months of my suspension, these questions were not answered until I returned to the National Assembly in February. I had to resubmit these questions. Sir, February to now, Honorable Member Gill, to share, listen carefully. February to now, sir, we're now in the month of May. These questions are on the order paper. And then the absence of the ministers not being here today to provide the appropriate responses. I don't know when again we're meeting. Sir. So perhaps we're going to meet in July when they want more money, when they come for more money, sir. Then perhaps the questions will be answered. So, sir, Mr. Speaker, as I shared several weeks ago, during my presentation on the single window system bill, number 26 of 2022, where I mentioned from a quotation by the Honorable Member Annette N, who leveled accusations against us on this side of the House. I shall repeat, and I heard it from the previous speaker, Honorable Charlie, and his colleague, the Honorable Dattadin. You know, and this is what Anil, the Honorable Member, had to say on April 20th, 2023, when he was conducting an interview on NCN regarding local government elections 2023. And this is what he had to say. We are obstructionists than constructive. So, sir, today, we're not obstructivists. We're not obstructivists, sir. We're being constructive, sir. The mere fact we can submit a motion asking for the standing orders 22, 23, and 27-2 to be amended to just cater for 4 days rather than 27 days and months, or 6 months, probably a year for responses. Isn't this constructive and reasonable, sir? So, sir, the other point you raised, we do not give constructive contributions. You heard from my colleague, the Honorable Tabitha Sarabo, who quoted what is happening in the UK, what is happening in Canada, and what is happening in some part of the world regarding their standing order. You heard from Catherine Hughes, my honorable member, making recommendations how we can improve. Isn't it that we're offering constructive recommendations, my colleagues? When he also stated, Comrade Speaker, when we, the opposition, not in the National Assembly, the business of the House flows smoothly. But when we are here, there is no constructive alternatives, only constructive criticism. Well, Comrade Speaker, I guess the honorable member will agree with me this morning that we have provided, as I said before, constructive recommendation how we can improve Standing Order 22, 23, and 27 too. And Mr. Speaker, we are missing a big thing here, We are missing a big thing here, It was my colleagues on that side of the House in 2020 to get rid of my honorable member as chairperson of the PAC. What they did, sir, they brought a motion to this House and amend the standing order to get their way. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, Anil Nandalal, accused us of breaking mace. But as I stand from this position, I am seeing the mace right before me intact. That again accused us, sir, of stealing the mace. But we're all seeing the mace before us, sir. Mr. Speaker, we were accused of assaulting parliamentary staff. Now, which one of these staff would have reported that they were assaulted by any member of the opposition? I'm still awaiting that report. We are accused of dancing and singing, but sir, we were accused of dancing and singing. We blow whistles and we behave in most unparliamentary manner. But let me tell you something. You forgot what Chetty Jagan did, the late Chetty Jagan did with the mace. You forgot what Honorable Dharam Lal did when he verbally assaulted my colleagues on this side of the House. You forgot what my honorable friend, Christian brother in the faith, the Honorable Bishop Edgell did some years ago in the National Assembly. We forgot what Kwame McCoy, the honorable member, did in this National Assembly to my colleague Tabitha. So who behaves in an unparliamentary way, sir? Therefore, Mr. Speaker, today we on this side of the Assembly have demonstrated that we are constructive and have explicitly provided solutions and recommendations how the proposed amendments to Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27 can assist in strengthening parliamentary democracy, which will aid us as representatives of constituents and constituencies in providing adequate and timely feedback to the people of Guyana. As I prepare to conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would urge my colleagues on the opposite side of this Assembly to support this motion. I have heard two of the members so far. They have spoken that they have no intention of supporting this motion. All right, you're so concerned. You're so concerned about the 4 days. But what you fail to do is to provide to the National Assembly an amendment is. And I guess we will all support it. It should not be used, Mr. Speaker, it should not be used for political grandstanding. And we started a display this morning about SOPs, about who rigged, about who this, and about who that. But they forgot the SOPs have all outlived, the SORs have all outlived the SOPs. But you know what they're failing to chant, sir? The local government, the forgeries of dead people, the forgeries of migrant people for the local government elections of 2023. And listen to me, Mr. Speaker, he's not here today, but I guess he's somewhere and his ears are glued to what I have to say here this morning. It was the Honorable Barra Jagdeo who went publicly to offer an apology to families who lost their loved one. So fraud is fraud. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we should not use this motion. We should not use this motion for political standing and politicking, but for the benefit will derive. I just fix your business, right? But for the benefits it will derive for all of us as legislators. Mr. Speaker, as I stated in my opening remarks, I will read it once again by commending my colleague, the Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, for tabling a motion of this nature to amend Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27-2 and call on all of us, 65, Bishop, I know you're going to join with me as a brother in the faith. Call on all of us on the other side of this assembly to give full support to the motion. Let us demonstrate maturity and show our citizens that we can disagree to agree. Can we do it? I will boldly say, sir, yes, we can. Once again, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God bless us all. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, and just before I yield to my seat, let me take this opportunity. I should have done that before. You know, Bikram is a very close, dear friend of mine. But I just want to take this opportunity in extending happy birthday to my colleague and brother, Vikram Bharat. May God continuous blessings be with you, and may you live to see many, many other birthdays. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson. You see how good your presentation is when I don't have to interrupt you? Excellent. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. David Patterson. David?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, put on back your mic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me start off by joining my colleagues in wishing the Minister, Bikram, happy birthday. You are a leader for the side of the house, boss. We're not blushes over here. Mr. Speaker, I stand here in support of the motion moved by my honorable colleague, Ganesh Mahipal. Sir, this motion is simple, and it's simply seeking to bring some sort of conformity, structure, understanding to the process of submissions of motions in the time frame and questions in the time frame for the turnaround of these motions, sir. It has no hidden agenda. It's simply seeking, Mr. Speaker, so that we can ensure that the business of this House can be done in a structured manner. And I like to give the members, I mean, obviously not in here, but the members of the public listening, reasons why we on this side of the House think that such a motion and approval of such a motion would be of benefit to this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in October of 2021, sir, I submitted a motion on the shore bases, the question of location of shore bases and those things like that. No, so a motion. I submitted, honorable member, not a question. I submitted a motion to be debated on October of 2021. Sir, the motion is, I mean, I know the honorable member, and I'm going to show, sir, I don't know, I was particularly singled out, I don't know, for whatever reasons. Sir, the motion took 80 days to be approved, and 81 to be debated. I asked every 2 weeks, and exactly as the honorable member said, you would ask the parliamentary staff, can I have the status of the motion? And they would very meekly and humbly reply, it's with the speaker. I forwarded it to the speaker for his response. You asked the speaker, and unfortunately, we have one of the busiest speakers in the Commonwealth. He's always traveling. So when you, so
Thank you very much. It's a demanding job.
yes, I mean, obviously, and you were enlightened that the speaker is a part-time job. So the extra time is spent traveling, promoting, of course, the Parliament of Guyana. Today, the speaker was traveling, and there was no response. When, so, of course not, we don't want to disturb the speaker's script. I mean, we reached so infrequently, said nothing could disturb it. Sir, when the speaker was eventually approached, and I'm telling, I'm only using these as background for the public to understand why such a motion would be. When the speaker was approached, he said, sir, it's been 60 days. He says he had responded to the clerks, he responded to the parliament. Sorry, I'm here in front of you, sir. You could stop me anytime I misspoke anything that you say. And when he said, oh dear, it's now back with the parliament. The parliament said no. Eventually, sir, we found out the mistake was a human mistake. The speaker had responded to the clerk in an email, but forgot to press send. So it was in his draft folder. That's it, and the speaker said it was in his draft folder. 80 days on a very important matter. The day before the day, and this is what the public has to know, the day before it was debated the day before the budget. So Saturday, of course, we went here till 4 in the morning. The motion was defeated, and the next day was in the budget, and the government put in $43 billion for the project. And sir, I'm not assuming anything nefarious about it, but it's very strange, the coincidence of what happened, sir. So the motion is simply saying, let us have a timeline. So therefore, at the end of the expiration, the 4th day, 10th day, the 15th day, somebody could say to the speaker or to the clerk, you haven't responded. And they can check their draft folders and their emails and press send. That's all. So there are timelines, so therefore people can obviously be. So when the timelines come are hit, something happens. Sir, to leave it open-ended, sir, will suffer the fate in which I did, sir. But that's not the only one, sir. I submitted a motion, a question. Yes. A question, October 18th, 2022. on the Wales gas ashore. Of course, I shadowed the oil industry. It took 36 days for approval. This time, sir, it wasn't an issue of no one wants to press set. It was simply an issue of nothing. Absolutely nothing from the parliament, absolutely nothing from anyone. And sir, what the reason that we're doing here, the reason we're bringing this motion is we don't fall into these things. They belong to the timeline. Sir, we know you're a busy man. We know the parliament clerk, of course, they're full time. So therefore the time constraints here. Sir, insurance motions are submitted on insurance, sir. It took 36 days. 36 days, sir. And after it was surgically dissected several times, it made it onto the order paper. And of course, there's an issue. There's an issue between being published as a notice paper and debated. That's quite something. Sir, that is not acceptable for a country, sir, that is deemed to be the fastest growing economy in the world, where questions submitted on behalf of the people of Guyana and motions can take 3 months. And Ferguson spoke about 6 months. Sir, most times, and I'm not opposing it, most times when we query this, and of course I have finance, I send emails, I don't ring, so I like to back. Most times when we query this, the response has always been, it's with the speaker. You have to pick this up with the speaker. Sir, we're not accusing anyone. Sir, we know that there is a saying, but I know, sir, there's a saying that a bad workman blames his tools. Sir, all this motion is seeking to do is ensure that you, Mr. Speaker, and the Parliament have better tools so that the blame can be reduced. Sir, several members of civil society, in particular a group, Red Thread, and a group of female activists, as I shouted out on that, have asked us, me in particular, to submit questions to the Parliament, sir, because they would have submitted these questions to all the ministries, including the ministry headed by my good friend who's celebrating his birthday today. Several questions, sir. I'm copying on them. These questions are almost on a daily basis. So the Minister, Office of the Prime Minister, the Office, the Vice President, EPA, Exxon, EEPGL, sir, and not one of these questions that they would have submitted was answered, not even responded to, right? That's outside the Parliament. And as a last resort, sir, and as a last resort, they've asked if myself and some other members can raise it in Parliament. And unfortunately, we had to say, I said to them, it's almost a fruitless effort, because by the time your questions get in, by the time the Parliament, and I must for the record say this here before anyone in the Parliament staff comes to me afterwards and says that they're not doing their job. They acknowledge receipt within 24 hours. The Parliament staff acknowledges receipt within 24 hours of your submission. And I must commend them for that. So there's the 4 hours, the 4 days proposed by Honorable Member, my boss, does not even account for the Parliament staff. Within 24 hours, they acknowledge receipt. Sir, so the blame, the 4 hours, we don't have to put a timeline in for the Parliament staff, sir. The timeline obviously lies elsewhere. And I've said to them, it is a fruitless effort. That our Speaker is a wise and busy man. He has several issues which he has to contemplate, and they're addressing the bothersome motions at times from persons, particularly from myself. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues. I don't want to speak for them. Maybe it's not a priority. What we're seeking to do here is obviously not make it a priority, but make it in such that there is a notation that the Speaker And I must commend him for this as well. I must commend him. I miss him if I don't miss him. He is a fella like me that likes electronic. Yes, he does everything online, and I commend you for that. Sir, there's a little tag online which will be called a reminder. Sir, so if we pass this motion and the Parliament staff gives you something today, automatically it sets a reminder in 4, 5, 6 days, so that you would know, pops up on your screen at the beginning of the day, wherever part of the world you are, that you are supposed to respond by. So and if there and the motion contemplates, sir, if you're too busy or the Parliament is too busy, we're engaged in budgetary debates or something like that, you can notify the mover of the motion or the submitter of the question that we are busy this moment, we require additional time. So the 4 days is just simply for you to acknowledge and respond. So if the proposed timelines is deemed restrictive, sir, and I said it wouldn't be restrictive for the Parliament staff because they respond within 24 hours. It would not. So if it is deemed restrictive for the other persons that have to look at it and approve, the government, sir, and with your suggestion, your guidance, like you've been always great at guiding them so far in this 12th Parliament, you've guided them along the absolutely correct path, always, and ensure that they stayed along this correct path. You can, with your suggestions, sir, you can always suggest an alternative. If 4 days is too short, too restrictive, like honorable member, that's it is set out, if it falls on Good Friday and those things like that. We don't count holidays, but never mind, we're contemplating 4 working days. You can, sir, suggest an alternative timeline. However, in doing nothing, sir, in us as a collective doing nothing, shows that we are not progressing. It shows that as a Parliament, we're not even, sir, you, one of the initiatives I know that you have been championing is the e-Parliament, and I endorse that. But what is the use of e-Parliament without structure and timelines? So the objective of e-Parliament obviously become more efficient. The more efficient requires timelines and milestones and guidelines. And so this, your support and maybe your nudging of the government side support for motion like this, sir, probably is the first cog in the wheel to us achieving your e-Parliament ambitions. So I urge the members on the other side of the House not to simply look at this as a motion that has any other hidden agenda. It's simply bringing some structure and timeline to the process. So with those few words, I like to endorse the motion, and I trust when the next speaker gets up on the opposition side, she will propose an alternative date if the 4 days are too restrictive, and we can all unanimously agree. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, I will continue to the completion of this motion, then we'll take a break. Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjattan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And happy birthday, Barack. I want to just read a note on the standing orders, the most recent edition which I have, which indicates that standing orders are not written stone. They're subject to review. They're subject to amendments, especially when those amendments will enforce and ensure an efficacy to the work that we do here. And the standing orders of the National Assembly, and I'm reading, were amended in 2011 by the Special Select Committee in the report of the draft standing orders. Members worked assiduously in conducting meetings over a 4-year period, where they carefully considered making deletions, insertions, and also ensuring that the language is gender neutral. On 25th of July 2011, the report of the draft standing orders was adopted by the National Assembly. Further amendments were made thereafter, July and December 2012, to these standing orders. Mr. Speaker, on matters of questions put to ministers and motions by the opposition, you are the gatekeeper. That is an important point in every Westminster type democracy. You are the gatekeeper as to whether the question is qualified to be put on the table, and of course, when a motion is to be put. And what we have is that an open-ended sort of arrangement was granted drafting in 2011 because we were informed, and I recall this because I was a member of the standing committee, that there is a convention that speakers are going to ensure that the questions and motions from the opposition are heard as expeditiously as possible, and if they do not qualify, that disqualification will come very early. Because, indeed, rules in this honorable, noble assembly are generally sometimes best made and left unwritten. It is necessarily so because not only of historical reasons in which we took our methods from, which has by practices and procedures and so on that are largely unwritten, written in a book by Erskine May. And so it is in that context then whereby being the gatekeeper and having a convention that you will deal with matters expeditiously, it was left open-ended as it is in the standing orders 22, 23, and 27. What we have seen, and that is just like the law, whenever you see certain things occurring in the law or any other institution that requires timeliness in decision-making or time dealing with an issue, you then can come and change or amend or insert a new amendment. And what Mr. Mahipal is doing here is simply the fact that it, as Mr. David Patterson just mentioned, a matter took 8 days to be determined, and we all know you're a very busy man. I know that you're a very busy man. It is important that we now ensure for future parliaments that a time period be granted, not necessarily for the answering of the question, Mr. Speaker. This is for you to make a determination whether the question and motion is qualified or not. And if it is so qualified, that you place it on the order paper. 4 days. So once indeed it is known that the clerk has received the question or motion, within a 4-day period thereafter, it should be then, and it is sent to you, and we know that conventionally the clerk operates pretty efficaciously. He would send it to you within probably hours or a day. You then must ensure that you make the determination that this matter should be then ruled on as to whether it's qualified or not. And if so qualified, that it be put on the table. Timelines in view of our little history in this 12th Parliament are needed. And we can see that it is needed because whenever a question or a motion comes up, it is because the maker of that question or the person questioning or the person making the motion, the mover of the motion, by virtue of his politics on the ground, see that it is necessary. It is topical at that point in time. And the reason why he or she then asks the question or moves the motion. When then you have a delay that can be extensive in it not even being tabled or the decision not being known whether it is disqualified, there is a certain disadvantage that mover of the motion or asker of the question is put into. And especially now, since we are a representative democracy, the people who might have urged the question or motion are then not in a position, but until some 80 days after, to make the point, to know that indeed it was disqualified. Or it is, just please. It is something that is, what I am trying to get at is the uncertainty. There is. You would know this, Mr. Speaker, because indeed you were a parliamentarian too that wanted questions to be answered by ministers. I was there with you. You had moved motions too. And as far as I can recall, those were done expeditiously. In view of the fact that it is not being done expeditiously, and we are not in any way denigrating you as a speaker. We are simply saying that in accordance with the evolution of our parliament development, that it is necessary now that we put in a deadline period. And deadline periods are necessary. I remember when being in the parliament in 2009, our constituents, and even at that time the government's constituents, had indicated that judges are taking a long time to write their decisions. They hear the trial, they take all the evidence, and then nothing happens for long periods of time. And, we then went to Parliament in 2009 and passed the time limit, can't recall the correct name, Time Limit for Judicial Decisions Act 2009. Yes, Judicial Time Limits for Judicial Decisions Act, I think it was, 2009. And we indicated that once the trial is completed in the High Court, within 160 days, I think it was, there must be a decision. At the Court of Appeal level, we indicated that it must be, I think, 30 days after arguments are heard that you must do that. Why? Because we wanted expeditiousness about our decision-making. And the expeditiousness is a fundamental pillar because decisions affect people's lives. In the case of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, it affects the parties. It affects precedents because we want them as early as possible. In this case, we want to know the answers to questions as early as possible. So the people that got the answer must know that the thing is laid on the table there. We should, yeah. In this case, where we are asking via Mr. Mahipal through this motion that it be done in a 4-day period after you would have gotten it as to whether it's disqualified or not, is fundamental because there can't be any delays or any uncertainties because in 4 days you would have made a ruling. If indeed it is disqualified, it is disqualified. Well, we could come again with some amendments, or you could amend it as you have done with a couple of my questions. And then it's proceeded with. then of course, we would expect the convention that ministers ought to, as within a short time as possible, as our kind mayor said. In England, it's about 2 days, 3 days. They got to answer because the thing is topical. Why are you going to wait 80 days or more or 40 days when it is not topical? That is not democracy. The people out there would like to know the answer now. And if the representative of the people find that indeed it is, then there should be a quick answer to the question as possible. So there is nothing, as was said by Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin, and I must say that it is rather weak submissions he made, very tenuous, that we will not suffer at the whim and fancy of the opposition by asking for a 4-day. The entire tenor and intent of this has been missed by him completely. And the whole point of it is that indicating that we are doing damage to democracy. If it is anything, just like the conventions in England and other Commonwealth countries that indicate that, yes, a speaker will do it in a very quick time, make the decision, and thereafter the minister will be allowed a quick time to answer, or the motion will be given time in Parliament to be debated, like this one. It is all for the strengthening of democracy. And that extraordinarily robust period that we had during the 2002 period, with all those basic needs for parliamentary, the 2 Englishmen that came, you know that the period, sir. This is what we did when we drafted and strengthened the standing orders. It was clearly to strengthen scrutiny. Scrutiny for our people. When opposition members ask questions, it is done so entirely to scrutinize government. And a government that wants scrutiny must understand that it enhances the democracy and accountability and the transparency. And so I cannot understand when he indicated that we are not going to suffer at the whim and fancy of the opposition when they ask for 4 days. And very untypical, a very good lawyer, he gives the impression as if the holidays must count enough. Come on, I didn't understand that because he knows holidays don't count. But whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, this is but something that will assist us in knowing answers, getting information. And you know why too? Because we got a commissioner of insurance. And it is a notorious fact that indeed we don't get answers from the commissioner of information. I said insurance. Commissioner of that appeal, no? But it is important. And we don't get. I have asked personally questions for answers by my good friend, Mr. Ben, because I speak here also for public security. Scrutiny. Yeah, well, I can ask. Or I am also a member that could ask any question. Any member could ask any question. And the other aspect of the matter that I want to bring is scrutiny is so important that we then also had created in that 2002 period something called the Public Security Sector Reform Committee, Public Security Parliamentary Committee, whereby questions could be asked, and if they feel that the answers are sensitive, we ought to get them in that committee. That committee has not been set up. So it seems like we don't want scrutiny. 3 years now, we name the people from the opposition and the government who will sit in that committee, and no meeting thereafter has been. Why this escape from transparency and scrutiny and questioning and cross-examination and all of that? And why after the convention says when I'm going through Erskine May, generally when you have these committees formed, parliamentary committees, within a reasonable time, because they give you a little space, they must become operational. They must become operational. What do we have here in relation to a parliamentary scrutiny committee? Nothing. We can't even ask Mr. May Thomas anything about all that has happened recently. But you know what? When we were in government, they called Mr. Silal Prasad.
But, honorable member, persons who are not in the House to represent themselves, you shouldn't name them. So there are two names here.
We had questions coming from the ministers then, the opposition then. Mr. Harry Gill, Madam Gil Teixeira. If you see questions that came to me, all right, we're gonna form this committee, we form it, and for 3 years or whatever, questions asked. Okay, well, what's your policy on crime? Okay, come, Mr. Silal Prasad, and he gave everything. Oh, well, what your plans on prison? Everything. So the scrutiny that is a bulwark of democracy was done. And so to that extent, then I'm saying that, and it was done very expeditiously. We formed the committee and all of that. So whenever now we got problems in security issue, we simply do not have even that, what is called, in-camera method by which we could get the answers. You know, we can't. And so, and I'm pleading again publicly here, Mr. Ben, convene meetings and let us start getting operational that public security sector committee. I want to say that in this standing orders, we got timelines. Timelines is not a new thing. I want to add this point to what I've made before. I have gone through the standing orders hundreds of times, and I can recall that there's a 1 month period sometimes we put timelines. Was it not only recently when we had that select committee whereby something is going into the select committee? 1 month. 1 month we got to go to the select committee and come back here. They put a timeline. Single window bill. And we have had timelines of 6 days written into this standing order, from the first reading of a bill to the second reading of a bill. I think 6 days. Why timeline? It is because efficacy, effectiveness, and the fact that timeliness, it is very, very important. And so there shouldn't be something that's asking for a 4 days period to know where we stand, whether the question is disqualified or not, or whether it should come with an amendment, and so on. What is wrong about a timeline being put when the conventions in Erskine may say it must be at a most short or reasonable time, to the extent of, in that country, ministers are asked off the bat sometime questions, 2-3 days, because of the topicality that is the nature of question. And so I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't have a government that is aiding and abetting delays to answers of questions or to motions. If this government practices what it preaches, we're going to get support for this motion. Because they have done it with judges, they have done it here with putting timelines and all of that. And so we must have indeed support for this motion for the reasons that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, the Honorable Member, Ms. Gilshay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Private Members' Day, and if this is what the private members can come up with, then I think it's a sad reflection of the parliamentary opposition.